Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome to the Monday stream for December 6th, 2021. I would like to welcome everybody. Tonight we are drinking. We're going to try and finish this, but it won't be happening tonight. The Ardbeg Wee Beastie. As usual, I'm adding a fair amount of water to it. And it's reasonably tasty, and we are clipping Croix de Guerre for reasons we'll get into. My backlog of ASL counters to clip has gotten even bigger, so we really got to deal with that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. We will... Nice couch. I have no idea what he's even talking about. So let me direct your attention to the links in the video description. Our channel of the week is My Own Worst Enemy. It is a channel that concentrates on solitaire games, so please check that out if you're interested in that. I know Stigler's going bananas right now because we dared mention the heresy that is solitaire wargaming. But if you're into solitaire wargaming, and lots of folks are, check that channel out. The big news, of course, this week, and we're gonna talk about this and try to capture the appropriate level of solemnity about this, And we're going to talk about, new editions of older war games too, but that's a subject we can, I can talk at length about that. So let's get the sad news out of the way. Christopher Dean, the owner and operator of the NWS Wargaming store, which is an online store that I have recommended to people many times, has passed away. I do not have any details about what has occurred, so I can't provide any knowledge. I can tell you that both his father and his wife had passed away relatively recently. And his one of his collaborators with NWS. So understand. Let's say hello to everybody before we get into this. But I would like to say up front that folks should be sensitive to the his friends and family and their feelings in this time of loss. So before we talk about that in detail and what news I have, which is not like privileged news or anything, but let's say hello to Missing Seattle, Charles Latora, Matt Taylor, John Sy from the sunny Philippines, Alan Salazar, Mike Anthony, Wade Moore, Crap Phone, Stigler is in the house, as is Kilroy, Joe Faust from Northeast Ohio, Rick Cox, Lind Pratt, also from Central Ohio, Fast Hines, Tim Zales, James Whitmer, Doug Blayart, Jim Jennings, Carl from the Wargame Bootcamp, Carl Crater, as in Copernicus, Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, Peter Bergs, Chad Kennedy, Daniel Berger, if I haven't mentioned you, Brian, Henry Sikorsky, James Whitmer, who I think I already got, John Longshore, thank you, John, your package showed up today, Alan Salazar, I've already mentioned, Fat Ladies Fishing, David Imperato, Kyle Reese, Vince Ree, Jason R. LaRiviere, The Command Tent, Dale Brady, Jeff Beeler, Jeff Anderson, Harry Z, John Sy, we've already talked about, Michael Potts, William Bird, Fucko, Ken X, Messing Up Rules, Mike Orwick, Manders, Gordon James, Wendell Waters, Cardboard Casualty, which is, I think we can all agree, a fantastic name, H. Tuna, Michael Schmaus, which is also a pretty fantastic name, Achilles, Brian Gash, Juju Bear, and other folks who might be stopping by. So I would like to say hello to all of you. Please do give the video a thumbs up if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and probably all of you are. Please do subscribe. All that helps the channel number, as do, participating in the chats and showing up and all that other stuff. So thanks for all of that. John Keyports, thanks for stopping back by. So, of course, we had a record-setting week last week. I do not expect to pull in those kind of numbers tonight, but we did have some giveaways last week. I am mildly but not 100% pleased to say that all of the giveaways have been shipped except for the RuneQuest starter set, because I actually ran out of boxes. And I have ordered boxes, but they're not here yet. So I wasn't comfortable shipping that in the box that I had left over. So that's going to wait for another couple of days. But I figure probably nobody's going to die. In retrospect, the easiest, lowest impact giveaway was the one I just did out of, cash out of pocket, which was the counter clipper, because that was on its way out the door before I went to bed that night. So I think in future, when we do giveaways, there will be a high percentage of counter clippers and drop shipped items, which will save me the trouble of having to come up with packing material and all that other stuff. And that way, if something goes wrong, you can blame Oregon Laminations or Amazon or Compass Games or somebody like that. So once again, thanks everybody for stopping. Wow, we have actually a crap ton of people already. That's 99 viewers. Okay, so the NWS situation. Let's get this out of the way. And again, I want to emphasize, be aware of, this is a time of loss for people. Christopher Dean was a respected figure in the hobby, and it is a loss not just for his friends and relatives, real life friends and relatives, but for people in the hobby as well, some of whom knew him quite well. I really didn't. I had some contact with him. But we also need to, and despite that, we also need to be aware of the other question that this situation leaves open, which is what happens with folks that have open orders with NWS. Now, one of the people who was involved in some capacity in NWS is a guy named William Miller, who I think is on the computer game side of things, because remember, NWS was not just a seller of board war games, they also sold miniatures, and they also dealt with the very well regarded, I might add, although very spreadsheety looking, Rule of the Waves naval simulation. And if you had an open order for that, then William Miller can provide you with a key for it if you need it. I don't know how that works, so I don't know whether that's really necessary. On the other hand, Mr. Miller also says that the only people whose names were on the business were Christopher, who has passed away, and his wife, who has also passed away. So legally, nothing can really be done about any of that until probate. I am also hearing through back channels that there may be somebody who is working to resolve the existing order backlog. However, the recommendation right now is to either send an email to the support link that's on the website, which I did, and I haven't heard back, and I honestly, I don't expect to hear back, or to send a private message to the NWS Facebook page. And I did that, and I haven't heard back there either. So other than this clearly secondhand or third-hand information that somebody's working on it, I don't have any information that anybody's working on it, and it seems unlikely that anybody's answering those messages. I don't know that that's the case. I hope that ends up not being the case. I would make two recommendations here. One is, show some patience, right? Where, it's a bad time for somebody. But two, I don't expect anybody that has a and several people have reached out to me in the hopes that I had more information than they did, and that in a couple cases that turned out that they had more information than I did. I do not expect anybody, and I think it's unreasonable to expect anybody that had a multi-$100 order that had been getting sat on for the last 3 months with NWS to just say goodbye to that money. I don't think that is a good idea. Mike Orwick and some other folks are reporting that the website is down. I mean, it goes without saying that don't order anything new from them right now. Yeah, it's showing up as can't be reached. That's not a, things are on hold message. That's sounds like the bill didn't get paid for December and whoever the host was cut it off. That's possible too. I don't know that. That's totally speculative. So here's my recommendation. Email support@nwswargamestore.com, whatever the email address is. I think that was it. But you can't get to the webpage now to find it. So I guess I'll have to tell you what it is. So give me a second on that. I don't expect that you'll hear back from it. Remember that email is not the same thing as web hosting. So just because the website's down doesn't necessarily mean that the email hosting will be down. Because that could just be Gmail powered, Who knows? I will provide the email address. There's also an NWS Wargames Store Facebook page. You could send a private message to that as well. I have done both of these things and haven't heard back. It is my hunch at this time that we will not hear back. Again, we're in I very much hope I am wrong about this. But support I'll put it in the chat. I'm not going to try and read that off. This is the email address. Okay, you're welcome to try and email that. Do show some patience. Give it at least a few days. If that doesn't work, then contact your credit card company. And you can do this through PayPal, too, if you paid through PayPal. With details of the transaction, they will probably ask questions about have you tried to contact them, that kind of thing, when was the order placed, that kind of thing. They will conduct an investigation and you will get your money back. I have already gotten my money back for my outstanding order. I mean, it's a provisional credit, but I don't expect... I think there is a son or brother or something like that posted on one of the... Mike, if you don't mind sharing what was said... that might be helpful to the folks listening. So I just, if they want to tell us, hey, hang tight, that's cool, but I'm not going to pursue it because I already got my money back. if you need to contact your credit card company, you can request a chargeback. You will get your money back, and you'll get it back through PayPal as well. So bear that in mind. I mean, I'd rather have the games too, and I was in no hurry. But I mean, let's be frank here. My standard customer experience with NWS was I place an order, 6 to 10 weeks go by, and I got an order confirmation because that's automated. 6 to 10 weeks go by, and I send an email and say, hey, Chris, can I get some visibility? I'm not really in a hurry because I never am. Can I get some visibility on shipment? And within a couple of days, he would respond to me and say, yes, we're clearing the backlog out. Things are clearing up. We'll have it shipped soon. And within a couple of weeks, it would be shipped to me. That was my typical customer experience. And again, being blunt, and I also want to be sensitive to the loss that some people are feeling here. If there wasn't a months-long backlog of orders, we wouldn't be having to have this discussion. So now, legally, the talk about probate is quite right. It legally has to go through probate if there's nobody else running the business. MasterCard told me, mine is a MasterCard too. They will tell you it'll take that, but they'll probably also issue you a provisional credit within a few days. So they had great prices on games, the best prices on games. People are asking now, now that NWS is gone, what do we do with that's got comparable prices? And the answer is nobody. Nobody's got comparable prices. Not only that, but nobody else carries MMP at a discount at all. Cool Stuff doesn't carry MMP anymore, as far as I can tell. They have zero. Well, I can tell you that there's nothing from me that's on the way, because I use a cert tracking service that lets me get visibility on anything that's incoming. So if I show up with something, then I will A, feel bad, and B, probably give it away, because I went and ordered the same stuff from somebody else. So maybe. So Mike reports that Matthew Dean, some relation, says that he found packages that were ready to ship from 11/26 that he shipped. So if that, I don't know what to think about it. Again, we have to feel awful for the family and friends and all that. So, but I don't expect, and like I said, I think it's unreasonable to expect anybody else to just wave goodbye to their money. So thanks, Mike, for sharing that information. I have not reached out to anybody directly, but I have, emailed that account based on the recommendations of some other people on Facebook, and I didn't hear anything. So let's put these away. We're doing, obviously, French. So I do not like to start the show off on a big downer, by the way, and sorry about that, but, it's not anybody, it's the world's fault, if you will, right? So at some point, there will be a new Wargaming storage video about Games Depot. I'll check that out. Are they U.S. or Europe or Canada or what? 'Cause if they're Europe or Canada, that doesn't do me much good. Yeah, Gordon, that's my understanding as well. It was pretty much a one-man operation, and the prices reflected that, right? So Ritterkrieg also sells MMP, but they only carry, I checked, they only carry ASL stuff. So I didn't need any ASL stuff. That's a bit of an oversimplification. There actually is an ASL item that I needed, and John Longshore was kind enough to send it to me. So thank you, John, for shipping Forgotten War. This completes my big boxes of ASL, at least until Hollow Legions shows up, which should be any time. I get the feeling that they were still shipping North Africa until late last week. Does that sound right? Maybe. So So to put a cap on the NWS discussion, have your order information, but don't hesitate to be patient with whoever is involved, but don't hesitate to reach out to your credit card company and request a chargeback. You will get your money back. So I like Miniature Market a lot. In fact, if I was ordering like GMT or maybe Compass stuff, I would probably, best prices available are going to be from Miniature Market at this point. There's also Enterprise Games and Noble Knight, both of whom carry quite a bit of stuff. So, Fucko has not yet received his copy of North Africa for me to unbox. I didn't order it because I don't feel like I needed an SCS North Africa. A lot of people are in the market for it, and actually, as like big map topics go, I actually think North Africa is a lot more promising than a number of other big box topics that have been done by MMP, including Normandy and Market Garden. I think both of those would have benefited from a reduced footprint. Linda says some parts from Hollow Legions need reprinting. Well, they should have discovered that before they said we're going to start shipping it in 2 days, huh? Oops. Chad saying Gray Rooster. What is Gray Rooster? Is there like a website of Gray Rooster? There's the website. Okay. Here, I'll put it in the chat, just in case anybody can get some use out of this. It's worth checking out. And it sounds like they're in Ohio, too. It looks like looks like they have an excellent selection, too, for that matter. Okay, we'll bear this in mind. This looks like a pretty nice... Just looking at... Trying to find Panzer's Last Stand at a substantial discount. That's what I had ordered through NWS, and we're assuming it ain't coming at this point. So, and that website has the links to their BGG store and their other outlets as well. So, yeah, check them out. I will check them out. And hey, if they're Mike mentions Gamers Armory in North Carolina, that's true, and I know they've got a lot of MMP stuff as well. So at least ASL, and I think all the rest of it as well. Carl Crater is clipping the greatest day. That is fantastic. I've actually got a bottle of water here as well because we need it while we're drinking. This is actually number 2. We got a little bit of an early start. So yeah, we'll definitely check out Gray Rooster Games. That is worth a look. So, I guess I'll talk a little bit about media stuff. I'm watching... So we finished watching Foundation. It was pretty bad. I was left very displeased. Despite some cool bits, and despite a cast that is largely trying really, really hard. It's already gotten renewed for season 2. I've already canceled the Apple TV subscription, so I guess we're going to wait for season 2. Maybe they can kind of circle back around and come up with something that's at least vaguely waves in the direction of the source material. But this series didn't, other than after the first episode. The first episode was quite a faithful adaptation, actually, of the beginning of the first book. But after that, it went completely off the rails. And despite it being off the rails, I still thought episode 3 was really good. But unfortunately, episodes 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 all kind of sucked and felt super padded. So not very happy with it at all. The Wheel of Time series on Amazon, I am enjoying much more. It is also got some problems as an adaptation, but I think it's getting more right than it is getting wrong. And we are, I think, 5 episodes into an 8-episode season at this point. Matrix 4 is coming out I checked the date today, December 22nd. I'm curious to see it. My expectations are modest at this point. It is probably going to be a pretty cool looking movie, if nothing else. All right, so that's out of the way. So, among the things that are shipping real soon now from GMT are reprints of 2 or new editions of 2. I actually started writing a review of it. I don't know if it'll turn into anything. I don't feel quite the intense focus on it like I did with Dune. So I don't know if my review of it will just be me talking for 30 seconds on this stream. It might be. But on the other hand, it might be better. I didn't watch the anime of Cowboy Bebop, and I don't really plan to. Nor I might check out the series, but as a disinterested party, I don't see much reason to check that out. So we'll see. Lost in Space, I heard good things about. I think I watched 2 episodes of the first season and ran out of gas on it. But so I'm actually tempted to read the Wheel of Time books again, which of course is a giant project. But I might wait. I've waited this long. I might as well wait 3 weeks because it's such a huge project to finish the first season of the series. It's been a long time. So Perfidious Albion is talking about the corner rounders. That's true sometimes. When I checked prices a couple of weeks, which was about 2 weeks ago, because I was gonna buy a replacement at least for the 2.5 millimeter, they were the same cost on Amazon versus Organ Lamination's website. There have been times when it is cheaper, sometimes quite a bit cheaper, like $15 cheaper, directly from Organ Laminations. So bear that in mind. I ran out of gas on the Wheel of Time books, I think around book 7 or 8. And at that point, at the best of my recollection, 3 books had gone by, each of which were 800 pages, and no actual plot point had been advanced in that 2,400 pages, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So several books came out after that. Then Jordan passed away. Then the last 3 books were finished by Brandon Sanderson, and I understand he did a pretty good job. So we are talking about Wargames. We are getting back to Wargames. So let's see how many people fled at the non-Wargame discussion. Not too many, actually. Probably only a couple. So Wardrobe asks how often I play ASL. So reliably 2 to 4 times a year. We had there's a local group that gets together once a month to play ASL at a rotating local library, and I had just started going to that when the entire planet shut down for COVID. So there's this isn't a show with Dan, though, so we're not going to talk about food and hookers this time. So Ken Porter says he's hooked on Turkish historical dramas. I am a ringer for one of the Byzantine villains. Well, that's great. I assume you're talking about me. That's awesome. So anyway, so in the I don't know if it's going to be the next batch or not, but sometime in the next couple of batches, we're going to see a new version of Pacific War, new version of Vietnam 65 to 75, and Perfidious Albion, thanks very much. Those were buddy unboxings, so I've already turned them back over to Fucko. Organ Lamination sells on eBay? Maybe I should check into that. So yeah, we talked last week about Mark's plans for the future, which include Volume 3 of The Ancient World, which coincidentally will also include Volumes 1 and 2 of The Ancient World. Because if you think about how that system works, really all they need to include are some leader counters, and that's it. The maps are the same. I mean, it's the same map, right? You get the same map of Italy, the same map of the North Africa section, and then you need a third map of Iberia, and you got all the maps, right? So that there's and of course you'd need to put the scenarios in. So you need a book too, but you can pretty compactly fit the first 2 games into that box, and that's the talk right now, that it will contain all 3. Now I have the 2 old ones, but a lot of people don't, and frankly they're kind of pricey to go run them down. So Wardrobe, no, it is not. That's why, that's a disincentive for me to play ASL, frankly, because I'm mixed up. No, I'm not. We're good. We're good. Because of that. But you can always, it's easy enough to get back into it, because you start with starter kit scenarios, right? You say, we're going to play, one SK1 scenario, then we'll go to an SK2 scenario with some guns, then we'll go to an SK3 scenario with some vehicles, and before you know it, you're caught. And then all you need to know is bypass movement, concealment, snipers, and like one or two other things, and you're basically caught up. So it's easy enough to caught up if you stay on top of it. So I'm sure that we've all noticed the phenomenon lately that a lot of older games are coming back into print in some capacity. Another thing that I should mention, since Ted's probably watching, so Ted, I picked up The Dark Summer. There'll be an unboxing of it, so I'll talk a little bit about it, and Ted can stop correcting me every time I say something wrong about it. So it does look pretty good. So I haven't thought about when it will get to the table. So I will talk about... so eventually it's my intention to do a video on ASL organizing. I use these container store trays, which I've talked about before. All I have here is a label on the end so that I can see what it is on the shelf, but then there's another label that goes here that tells me what's all in the tray. And for most nationalities, there are two trays, one for the infantry stuff, one for the vehicle and ordnance stuff. The U.S. and the French have three trays, because there's three different French OBs, and in the U.S.'s case, there's actually three different U.S. OBs too, now that I have Korea. So and you need about 40 of those to do it. Now, I have had people tell me with all seriousness that they object to publishers republishing these old war games because they feel that it is distracting these publishers from publishing new games. And the old games are, in fact, still around. And to be honest, in most cases, the specific games we're talking about are not incredibly pricey collector's items. I mean, are they collector's items? A little bit. Like, a lot of the Victory Games stuff is not that expensive. Some of it is, but a lot of it's not. Like Victory Games Civil War, for example, you can get a copy of that for $30. I think I paid $45 for mine, and it's unpunched and in fantastic condition. Like Vietnam is more expensive, Carrier is more expensive, Ambush is more expensive, and Tokyo Express is more expensive. There are some pricier ones, but for the most part, and all of those, except for Ambush, are coming back, soonish. So in some form, right? In the case of Carrier, it's going to be Carrier Battles Philippine Sea, which is Carrier with with a new scenario, basically. So I'm kind of excluding Decision from this discussion, actually, because that's a little bit of a different, this is kind of a fine point to fine nit to pick, if you will. But Decision actually owns the rights to that stuff. So, Blue Water Navy is a modern game, or near enough, actually. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Thanks for stopping by. Central Front with updated... No, I don't think so. What are we talking about? Nobody's actually doing that. Modern War Magazine did their 7 Days to the Rhine thing, but while that, I think, started as a Central Front refit, it did not end up as one by the time it got published. So I don't think that counts. And for that matter, I'd say probably Carrier Battles doesn't count either. But a lot of other stuff is just getting straight reprinted and out it goes, right? The Third World War stuff, which is a GDW thing. I'm a little surprised that more GDW stuff isn't kind of in the pipeline. But... and that's because it's got clear rights, right? Stuff from Victory Games doesn't necessarily have a clear path to the rights. For the most part, the GDW stuff is either owned by, except for Europa, which is a special case. But then again, that's what I think people would want, right? If anybody, if you took a poll and said, what should we republish from GDW, I think the number one choice would be Europa. So, Stigler, I agree. It is not a Central Front reprint. It like I said, it started out as an idea that they were going to redo Central Front, but by the time it made its way to publication, it was something of similar topic and scale, but quite different at the end. A lot of gamers stuff, this is going to sound goofy too for anybody who's looked at like old OCS games, or old line of battle games for that matter, which go for absolutely berserk prices. A lot of the old like gamers Civil War Brigade series stuff go for peanuts. I mean, $20-$30. The Napoleonic Brigade series, those are not valuable at all. I'm super pumped about Third World War. If you haven't seen it, the latest Compass Games, whatever John calls the show, broadcast had Frank Chadwick on where he talked about that. So I think that's because Manila's all maps, actually, John. There's going to be fairly low density on that, but it's also huge footprint wise. It's got a lot of maps. So some of those Civil War regimental games are in fact quite old. The regimental sub-series of the Civil War Brigade series, I'm not sure if that's quite the right way to describe those, but I think Stigler's right on that. I think the fan blowback on that, and I think that's generally true. I think that's why Decision is now very reluctant to use old titles for new editions from Decision, unless it's a pretty faithful new edition of the original game, which they have done some of lately, right? They have it's not that new, it's 3 or 4 years old now. The new version of the old World War I game, First World War, what was it called? World War I? World War I. The Dunnigan design, the classic sort of attrition-based Dunnigan design. It's a very interesting design, actually, and very influential. That's a pretty faithful new edition of that. Their version of the New Battle for Germany, that's a very faithful rendition of Battle for Germany. And of course they keep in print something like Napoleon's Last Battles, and I really haven't seen any complaints that I take particularly serious about their version of Napoleon's Last Battles, other than having looked at the components, I don't think it's all that pretty for as new as it is. So, you know, when wargame designers retire, they design more war games after retirement because they all have day jobs. So I am also waiting on Sacred Oil. Very curious to see it. It's any time they're going to push the button on that. We'll see how that... I mean, I expect it to look really nice. So... So Fucko talks about the central front redo of from Thin Red Line, starting with Dogs of War and Less Than 60 Miles. I think that's got enough differences in it that I don't think it's really any more similar to, maybe a little bit more similar to Central Front than the 7 Days to the Rhine project. So I don't want to see a reprint of Panzer. Well, let me put it this way. If somebody reprinted Panzer Leader, I'd be fine with that. I just wouldn't buy it. I don't need a new Panzer Leader. I've got ample tactical World War II solutions, like a shit ton of tactical World War II solutions, more than I need. So I don't need Panzer Leader as well, or PanzerBlitz or anything like that. So Multiman has a new PanzerBlitz thing in the pipeline that's been in the pipeline for quite a while. I know they need playtesters. Last I heard, they need playtesters for it. It will probably be on a table at Winter Offensive as it was last time. So Stigler says the Thin Red Line thing stands on its own. That looks more different from Now, I've given that a pretty cursory look, okay? So do not take this as expert information. The thin red line redux of the Central Front stuff is more different from the Central Front games than their Next War redux is from the Next War, the big SPI Next War, which was the genesis of 1985 Under an Iron Sky, right? That's pretty different from, well, it's different from the SPI the Next War, but it's less different than the Dogs of War stuff is. I mean, that's a card assisted game, right? So very interested to see where they go with that. I would like to see a Balkans game, but they haven't talked about that. So the trick with Thin Red Line is you really gotta place an order. You really gotta make a reservation. Now the way they do it is super old school and super manual, and it works for them because they only print like 300 copies. You email them and say, please reserve me a copy of whatever it is, and they respond back and say you are on the list. At some point, you will receive an email that says, hey, now is the time to order, and you go order, and they will charge you. At that time, when making the reservation, they don't charge you. And it's, kind of the honor system, so I would encourage people to live up to their end of the bargain on that. And then they charge you when they ship the game. And by the time the word goes out to do it, they're ready to go, they're collated, they're literally ready to stick in a box with your name on it and send it to you. And they have shipping, I don't know exactly how this works, but they have a shipping source in North America, so you're not getting them from Italy if you order it in North America. So now, if I was in search of a better World War II tactical solution than ASL, the GMT Panzer is something I would look very closely at, particularly for armor. I don't think the armor, while ASL handles it, it's fine. I don't think that's a strength of ASL. Well, that's true. It's not like they're left with lingering inventory. Mo says there's no concern in selling out their games. And Fabrizio was on Facebook somewhere and says, yeah, they usually sell out between, 10 or 15 days. And I'm like, what? Fabrizio, you're kidding me. They're gone in like 10 minutes last time. When the last printing, not the last printing, but the previous printing of Under an Iron Sky, which was the second printing, that thing was gone in like an hour or two. They evaporated. So, if you want them, they're printing them to your orders of what you reserve. So, and I think it's too late for Sacred Oil now, but, and they do print a few extras, but not many. So it is the definition of boutique, publications. I don't really hate the Panzer maps. I don't think they're necessarily gorgeous, but I think they're fine. I don't think they gave me a number, actually. I'll be honest. I mean, I don't even see those games getting resold very much. John Leuscher asks, is Yaquinto's Panzer, which is the same Panzer. It's I may have misstated this guy's name many times. David Day or James Day. The Panzer series, Yaquinto's iteration of that game might actually I'd have to check, but might actually predate Squad Leader. That's possible. So, yeah, so with the Thin Red Line stuff specifically, I very seldom, not never, but very seldom do I even see those being resold. People are just not reselling those right now. I think the hexes on the Panzer maps are a little bigger, but I'm not sure that's a problem. I think I used to work with a fella named David Day, and I think that's where I'm getting that mixed up. So thank you, Alan. Highway to the Kremlin. Are we talking about the new printing of Highway to the Kremlin 2 from OSG? I got in on that early on, so I didn't have to worry about that. This does remind me that immediately after the holidays, one of the first things I have to push the button on is getting my pre-orders in for the 2 new OSG titles. which will, because one of them is the new 4 Lost Battles, that will complete that series for me. So, yeah, and you know, I thought about getting rid of that multiple times, and I even traded it for. I had punched, I think the Berlin scenario out just so I could fiddle with it, and I thought about selling it, and I was like, you know, I'll trade it for a fresh copy because I know everything's here, right? You know, with a little bonus for the guy I got it from. And then I ended up deciding I was going to, because of, you know, an unpunched copies, I was going to go for more because I could say it's unpunched, right? Rather than having to go on a big explanation of saying these 18 counters or whatever it is are punched. And I ended up hanging on to it because of that. Because it's like, look, these things are going to be, they are already absurdly expensive when you can even find them. And I'm at the point where a lot of my like wish listed stuff is in fact stuff for which the barrier is not that I don't have the money or I don't want to pay the price, although that's true in some cases too. It's that they're never listed, right? One of the examples of this would be, what's it called? Damn it. The Chickamauga game from the Great Battles of the American Civil War. Alan, if you have a copy, please let me know. An extra copy sitting around. The River of Death. And the fact is, I hardly ever see that up for sale on eBay. And when it does, it goes for a lot of money. But the problem isn't so much, because if there was a lot of traffic on it, if I saw it regularly, then I would eventually see it for a price that I felt was a little less unreasonable. But that's not the experience, right? I hardly ever even see it. It hardly ever even comes up. So I would just as soon GMT reprint that. Now, if you haven't watched the interview with Dick, I think it was Dick, correct me if this is wrong, Alan, Whitaker on the GMT stream from the San Diego Historical Games Convention, he talks about the stuff that's in the pipeline for the Great Battles of the American Civil War system, and there's a lot of fairly exciting things in the pipeline for that system. You know, at the same time, I'm generally happy to wait for a reprint, right? And also, for the record, like the Stones River game, for example, there's a kind of a lot of errata. It's some significant errata in there. I don't want to say a lot, but there's significant errata in there that is such that I would really like to see a new edition of it. So I am generally, and that's definitely true with this ASL stuff, which goes for absolutely batshit prices on the secondary market. I am unwilling to deal with secondary resellers, and in fact, and I think this is super douchey, but I'd probably do it too. If I had like an extra copy of Hollow Legions, I'll just wait 2 years. It'll be out of print. I'll sell it for $500, right? Because that's the way it works. As soon as MMP says, "Hey, we're going to reprint Yanks," we see the constant marketplace over at Facebook. Guys saying, "Hey, here's my copy of Yanks. You don't want to wait for it? You're going to pay $300 or $400 for Yanks," right? And, you know, there's a whole dimension there of being irritated with the MMP's reprint pace, especially for ASL stuff, which A, they know is going to sell, B, they know it's going to be out of print again in 6 months. That's why that's irritating. Very little of that stuff is bullshit they need to sit on. Some of the scenario packs they end up sitting on for quite a while, but those don't take up a lot of warehouse space either. John Sy, I'm aware of the tri-pack idea. I'm not sure that the folks involved in that development team seem unsure of that format, of how that's going to work. So I don't know if it's going to... I mean, I'll buy it. If they do that, I'm good, right? I will absolutely buy it. And of course, there's a lot of markers in that series, and if you put all 3 games together, you would only need 1 set of markers. It's not as ludicrous an idea as it sounds, and GMT has done packages of similar size in the past. So, I mean, you'd have 3 maps with Gettysburg. You have, I'm pretty sure it's 4 maps for Chickamauga. And for Red Badge of Courage, I'm not sure how many maps are in that. But Well, yeah, it is capitalism, but it's also, I also have the freedom to say I'm not paying that. So I'm completely comfortable with saying I'm not willing to pay that. I will wait because I know they will reprint it. If I know they will reprint it, right? So, and yet there are occasions where I will pay a high price for stuff, right? But, when I pay a lot for something, it's something like I paid $160 for Fire in the East, for example, which is kind of a lot, but it's a 6-map, 12 counter sheet game. And if somebody was publishing a 6-map, 12 counter sheet game today, that would be considered a very reasonable price. It's enormous, right? So I was comfortable with that price. Same deal, War in the Pacific. I paid, I want to say, this might include shipping. It was a while ago, so this might include shipping, but I think I paid about $275 for War in the Pacific. Now, would I have paid $275 had I known that it was missing one counter? Probably not, because I can get it for a little less than that, not missing one counter, and the box is not in great shape. I am a huge fan, as Perfidious Albion implies, that the big multi-combo packs, whatever GMT's calling them, that they've been doing lately with a number of series, including Battle of the American Revolution and Men of Iron and the Musket and Pike things coming. I'm a huge fan of that. I love to get a bunch of games out of the way in one go, right? I'm a supporter of that, and I also hope, by the way, that somebody is going to continue the Men of Iron series now that Richard Berg has passed away, because he was the designer of all 4 of those, if I'm not mistaken. I think MMP's marketing. Okay, so Perfidious Albion says, unless MMP radically changes their marketing strategy back to focusing on ASL as their core product, does MMP really have a marketing strategy? I'm not sure they do. I'm not sure that what they have is not just ASL sells itself. There is Pete Bartlett, who is the social media guy. We're going to talk smack about MMP now for a while. And I say this with love because I'm a guy that buys quite a lot of MMP stuff, and I just sent them a big pile of money. So, $200 for Art. Stuka Joe, welcome to the stream. Stuka Joe, $200 for Art of Siege unpunched, I think is a pretty good price. That is one that goes relatively high. Thankfully for me, it is one that I am not particularly interested in. So I was actually in on an auction a month or two ago for several soapboxes, of which none of which I won. The one that I regretted not winning the most was Atlantic Wall, which I then went and picked up off the BGG Marketplace for less money anyway. So, everybody still loves Gettysburg games, right? Chickamauga is a great Civil War battle to play out. It's a great Civil War battle to have a war game about. And I think it would probably sell a lot less. Then again, if you look at how River of Death looks on the secondary market, there's some demand for it, but that demand doesn't necessarily equate to sales when the thing comes out. Now, GMT's got a pretty rigid pre-order system where, it needs... Technically, it doesn't need to hit 500 if it's a reprint, but it almost always needs to hit 500 if it's a reprint. So they can always, the mechanism is in place for GMT at least to say, hey, we're going to put this on pre-order and gauge interest that way. And if it gets really good numbers, then great, they redo it. And if not, well, then they quietly let it sit there for a couple of years and then drop it, right? So it would be a huge box, and you would probably need I'm going to say a 4-inch box for that, because even very conservatively, you'd need at least 4 counter trays for a package that size. I think you could do it 4 counter trays though. I think you get Gettysburg in one, both bull runs in one and Chickamauga in one, and then one tray for markers. I think that's doable. A 4-inch box, I think that's doable. So Perfidious Albion talks about the way that MMP has kind of just kept on without, I think, examining the idea critically. Just kind of kept on doing ASL the way Avalon Hill did ASL, which is to put these really big and expensive nationality boxes out. I would absolutely revisit that. I wouldn't sell it that way anymore. I don't think it's a good idea to sell it that way. They have made some big positive steps lately, like making the rulebook available in electronic format. This eliminates the problem that I had when I got back in ASL, where it's like, hey, the rulebook's out of print, Beyond Valor's out of print, guess I'm not getting back into ASL, huh? So now you can at least go to Wargame Vault and buy the rulebook electronically, which looks like a pretty nice implementation of that, by the way. Stigler says you can't get both bull runs into one tray. Okay, that's probably a fair statement. I would sell the counters as just counter box. I mean, you put it in a box or just freaking shrink wrap it. I'd be fine with that. And say, here's the Beyond Valor. Here's your marker set. Here's your Beyond Valor. Here's your Germans. Here's your Soviets. Here's your Americans. And just buy the nationality packs. And that ends up being like 4 or 5 counter sheets, maybe 6 counter sheets for most nationalities. And that shouldn't cost that much money. But instead, and then they could sell big scenario packs, right? Including electronically. I'd sell the scenarios electronically. I've even had the idea pitched to me that they should give the scenarios away because after all, you can't play it without the rest of the stuff anyway, right? I don't know that. I mean, I think that's true, but I don't know that I would agree with that either. But you could easily sell the scenario packs. Here's scenarios 1 to 50 for $50 or even $100. That's a lot. $2 a scenario. I think that's reasonable. I'd pay that. Even in electronic format, I think that's pretty reasonable. And MMP's not out a dime for print costs or anything like that. Well, there is the Kurt Schilling question too, which we're not going to get into here. My understanding is that Kurt retains some ownership share in MMP. He does not have any leadership authority and doesn't take any kind of role with the company. So that's my understanding. And, there's only so much you can do, right? If I stop buying stuff from every company who ever said something dickish or said something I disagree with, then I would literally starve, right? I mean, I can go to the local grocery store and find some asshole that works for them. So, we got to make these decisions as it's capitalism, right? You got to make these decisions. I've made my decision. So I think this is going to be relatively crowded tray, I think. Yeah, okay. There's the level 2 trays. Well, I mean, certainly, I'll be honest. If you want the ASL experience, just get the starter kit. Get starter kit number 1. Play the scenarios. There's like 6 or 8 scenarios in it. They're good scenarios. If you like it, then you can buy more starter kit stuff. And then if you decide that you're going to you want to play full ASL, maybe buy the rule book, and then play with your opponent's stuff. That is the thing you can totally do. You do kind of want the rulebook, but you can buy the electronic rulebook too. Oh, Jeffrey Wesovich says he used to work for 38 Studios. No, I think, and we've heard this in the chat. I'm pretty sure he's pretty much totally not involved in MMP, but my understanding is that he's still 1/3 owner. So, and I'm sure his big wallet was helpful getting them started in the first place, which is, if you recall, was just as a sort of secondary ASL development group. They actually had a very similar role that Digest Group did with MMP, or not with MMP, with GDW. ASL Napoleonics, talk to Critical Hit about that. So, But I mean, that's kind of a, we are kind of talking about new editions of, but in this case, new editions of old things that aren't going to get reprinted. Very little of the historical ASL material, for example, has been reprinted. Trying to think of any example that's not Red Barricades getting reprinted. Some of the smaller ones out of the journals, like the Gavutu Tanambogo campaign, that's in the new Rising Sun, and it was in the last Rising Sun too. Stigler says ASL is a cult, and I'm not sure he's wrong, to be honest. Certainly there's a sort of level of self-seriousness about within the ASL community that I think most other wargames don't have. And I'll be honest, that is an attitude that I find pretty intensely unappealing. But that's not just ASL, right? There's pockets of that all over the place. It's the tournament attitude, and I'm just not that kind of player. So that seems unappealing to me. For those people for whom, wargaming is a competitive exercise, like that's what it's about to them, is the competition. Totally okay, but probably I'm not a good opponent for them, and they're probably not good opponents for me. I am totally okay with that. Daniel Berger mentions the Hell's Highway reprint. I don't know what John Butterfield's involvement in that is, but it's certainly being marketed as John Butterfield's Hell's Highway. So, and that is coming from, of all people, New England Simulations. That was on a table at the Consim World Expo in August. I didn't go, but I saw pictures. That looks neat. Jeff Beeler talks about a Napoleonic role-playing game in Dragon magazine. I'd be curious to know what issue of Dragon that was. That doesn't ring a bell for me. Wade Moore says Napoleonic's using GCACW. There are issues doing that, actually. So that's actually kind of a natural... This question gets asked a lot. This got asked at the workshop that they did for GCACW. Boy, it's very difficult to not do that. Workshop that they had at Winter Offensive last time they had Winter Offensive. And it's something that has been considered, and I certainly would love to see a GCACW campaign level solution for Napoleonics, but it's actually pretty difficult. And if you want to know the reason why it's difficult, really you only have to talk to Kevin Zucker, because you can see the campaigns of Napoleon's system where there's an X1, an X2, and an X5. And that's why is you can't really do it with a uniform scale, because those campaigns take place on different scales, right? Especially Russia, but there are other examples as well where the campaign in Russia takes place over the span of Russia, right? It's friggin' huge. Whereas if you start looking at that like 1814 campaign in France in front of Paris, that takes place in a relatively small area. And that's Napoleon at Bay. You can get that on, with like 1 mile hexes or something like that. But then you have to start making adaptations and or compromises to the system to make it work at the bigger scales. And that is why the campaigns of Napoleon's system exists in multiple iterations of scale, because you cannot do Russia at the times one scale. It would be 10 maps, and that's ridiculous. And it would also suck that the turn scale is a factor there too, right? A great example of where a game where the turn scale really kind of ruins the game is the SPI Classic War Between the States. It's basically, it's set up exactly like War in Europe, where you have these sort of weak, I think they're called turns, but you have like a turn and a cycle turn. And after you do 4 turns and then do a cycle turn where you do production and stuff like that, okay? It's a direct copy of the way it works in War in Europe. And it all kind of, on the way out of this mechanic, it actually all kind of works. But to actually play it really is pretty frustrating, because you end up with, here's another turn where I didn't roll to activate any Union leaders. I can't do anything. Oh, and I picked a 0 chit because trust me, if there's a 0 chit in the pool, I was picking the 0 chit. So it was pretty frustrating, and I think we did fine, all things considered. I mean, as our performance as the Union team went, but it was pretty frustrating to play on a week-to-week basis where you have multiple turns and like not be able to do anything, and it's like an hour and a half just went by and we didn't do anything. Have fun taking your turn. So those are issues, right? And you'd have to consider that if you were going to do like a campaign level Napoleonics game. Not to say that it couldn't be done, but it would be difficult to do well. To cover both, say, just look at the campaigns covered by the Campaigns and Napoleon system. I think the ×1 games that I have are Napoleon at Bay, 1809. Is that behind me? It is not. Which is the Danube campaign of 1809, oddly enough. That's the campaign that includes Wagram and Wagram's the big, and Aspern-Essling. That Wagram is the big battle there, the big climactic battle, but Aspern-Essling is, I think, the more interesting battle of the two because of the way it shakes out, where like Napoleon is like caught pants down in this river crossing when he gets attacked. So Joe Perez says, whatever happened to the tactical Napoleonic system by David Fox using GMT's Austerlitz 1805? I'm not aware that was ever followed up on. Now, I will say, in defense of War Between the States, the output you get of the mechanics look pretty good. They're pretty believable. You get a reasonable result out of the game. It's much like Europa, but you just end up thinking, man, this was really kind of a much bigger slog than it needed to be to get there. So Achilles is talking about Le Grand Armée. So which Le Grand Armée are you talking about? Because there's, I think, more than two, but there's the two I'm thinking of are the old SPI Le Grand Armée and the much later Spitzer Le Grand Armée. The SPI one is at least fondly remembered. I don't know that I'd consider it worth playing now. The TSR one does not have a good reputation, but as is the case with some of those TSR games, have a bad reputation because TSR published them, and not necessarily on the merits of the game. I don't know that Le Grand Armée is one of them. I did obtain a copy of it recently, and I would like to give it a whirl at some point. So, invading Russia always seems to be a bad idea. So, strangely enough. So, Achilles means the old SPI. Now, those are two fairly different games, I think, based on the same sort of base system, or similar base systems anyway. Are we going to have another one of these? We might. The Spitzer one, however, is much more ambitious and covers all of continental Europe outside of Spain. So, which makes me think that it's worth investigating, even if you might have to make significant changes in it to actually make it work. So, another one that has recently, been redone is, of course, War and Peace, which is on the shelf behind me right there. The new fancy schmancy One Small Step edition, which is very nice. Yeah, I am probably not going to be drinking this bottle next Monday. There's about a wee dram remaining, but I'm not drinking any more than this tonight. So, because this is enough. Well, the Mongols did have pretty good. Well, yeah, it wasn't Russia at the time, though. That's kind of the distinction. Joe Perez has finally finished clipping Kharkov battles. I'd be curious to know what your experience clipping Kharkov battles was, because it was one of the most difficult games to clip that I've ever clipped because the counters are so thick. It was absolutely exhausting clipping those counters. So, good point, Mike Anthony. If you're going to invade Russia, you might as well invade it from the east. So, all right. So if folks haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Please do like the video. It helps the channel analytics and all that. If you want to help support Ardwulf's Lair, please do check out the links in the video description to the Patreon and the Ko-Fi and the merch store. There's, I put new merch up. I put hoodies and zip front hoodies, and I was really excited about the zip front hoodies, and they're already unavailable from spring, and my samples still aren't here either. So that's also irritating. So yeah, they were playing War and Peace at Compass Expo, and I think they had fun on it. Jackson at the Crossroads, that's one that I need. I am not really... So, which ones do I need? I don't have Terrible Swift Sword or Bloody April. And I'm actually good without Terrible Swift Sword, because I've got Gettysburg in the new version of the system, which I like better anyway. I do have Pea Ridge, Wilson's Creek. These are the old GBACW games. And Cedar Mountain. And at some point, I want to do a compare and contrast between Old Cedar Mountain and New Cedar Mountain. Although you could do that with Jackson at the Crossroads now, too. With Cross Keys and Port Republic. Which are in the new game. So, let's see here. These all mixed up. So I think I still need Drive on Washington and Jackson at the Crossroads. I think those are the ones that I need. And, it's not... I'm not willing to pay what they're worth, let me put it that way, in decent condition. I got Cedar Mountain for $5 or something like that in the magazine. I'm not sure they published it outside the magazine. So Vince Ree is clipping Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 while sipping Lefroy. Lefroy is one of my favorites. I like it a lot. I don't have any right now. So... They're doing crews now. So I'm trying to keep the vehicle and the gun crews straight, because I bin them separately. Death Valley is a really great package. It's also a really good... Stigler, what's the MSRP on Death Valley? I think it's like $80 or $90, but you get a ton of content in it, including a lot of small battles going up to a couple of quite large battles. So you get a lot of variety of battles at different sizes. So you got small battles to learn the system on, and big battles to, when you really want to get into it. It's a really nice overall package. Alan is working on a introductory... I don't know if it's going to be positioned as introductory, but it's going to be 4 small battles in one box. So it's not only Stonewall's Shenandoah campaign, it's Sheridan's Shenandoah campaign too. That's the I feel like Jackson's Valley campaign is more interesting at the operational level than at the tactical level of GBACW, but that doesn't mean that the battles themselves aren't interesting and worth playing out. They are. Whereas Sheridan was not Stonewall Jackson, right? There's a lot of really great maneuver in that campaign that Jackson did, that is really highlighted well by the great campaigns of the American Civil War system. The same logic applies to Lee's 7 Days campaign, by the way, which is on to Richmond. There is a Death Valley expansion That is on P500. I got that on order too. I got Into the Woods on order. I'm going to just get friggin' annihilated by charges from GMT in like January and February and March probably. So if Bragg dies in 1863, the Confederates put somebody better in charge. McClellan was never going to get killed because he was always running away. So I haven't, John Sy, I have not played Gringo. I do have Gringo, and it's actually well regarded, and has an expansion, and there's very little on the Mexican War in not nothing, but the Mexican War is, which, you know, is where a lot of those Civil War commanders, you know, earned their literal stripes, right? Including Lee and Longstreet and Grant and some other people. You know, became known figures in the Mexican War. And yet there's really not that much on the Mexican War. It's not a popular topic. There's been odds and ends here and there. There's also Halls of Montezuma if you're interested in more of a strategic card-driven approach, but I've heard bad things about that. There's a couple odds and ends that have appeared in S&T over the years. So I think if you're specifically interested in the Mexican War, and if you're interested in the American Civil War, you should at least be a little bit interested in the Mexican War, because it was so formative for so many of those characters. Then Gringo's a really good game to have, and I'm happy to have it. The only game in the series, in the modern series, that I'm missing is the Chickamauga game. And like I said, that's just because it never even comes up. Carl Crater mentions the Hollandspiel operational Civil War games. Those are, I think, mostly those are John Tyson games, and those look interesting, but I have not personally investigated them. As I'm kind of not giving them a fair shake because I'm so pleased with my current operational solution of great campaigns of the American Civil War that I don't feel like I need to investigate alternatives. So, now I think there was kind of a refit kit for Halls of Montezuma that may have fixed some of the problems too. I don't have I don't have any visibility on when A Most Fearful Sacrifice will be coming. So it does look very nice. I also have all of the Blind Swords games that Revolution Games has done. There's one that I think came from Flying Pig, I think. The First Day at Gettysburg game. The Devils to Pay, which is a great title. I don't have that one. I have all the others. And I like that series too, but it's definitely a much lighter, much faster playing series without a lot of the additional detail that one gets out of Great Battles of the American Civil War or even A Line of Battle. So, but it's a good series. Justin C. says that he played Hood's Last Gamble, which is one of those from Hollandspiel, and says it doesn't stand up to GCACW. That I can't comment on that, but I mean, again, I'm so happy with GCACW that I'm cool with my current solution. I'm willing to try almost anything in principle, though. Chad Kennedy mentions that he wants to see La Bataille de Mont Saint-Jean released. I know that Clash of Arms has been working on that for a while. It's a bit... I would like to congratulate Clash of Arms games for still being in business. Let me put it that way. They have never been a big company. I have no idea what that's about. They have never been a big company, and their output is relatively small. They're still in business, and I'm glad they're still around. Even if every single Clash of Arms game that I have has either been riddled with errata or I've had to contact them to get replacement parts. I don't own that much Clash of Arms stuff. That's probably an exaggeration, actually. But I have, I own like 4 Clash of Arms games, and I've had to contact them on like 3 of them. I own like 60 MMP games, and I've had MMP. I've had more problems with MMP than I am with a lot of other publishers. I think I've had to contact them 3 times for problem components, something like that. Stigler says U.S. Civil War by GMT is the best Civil War strategic level game that he knows of. Now, a lot of people will say that they greatly prefer the Victory Games Civil War to that, and I think I am sympathetic to the reasons why they feel that way. But nevertheless, I also feel that U.S. Civil War is maybe not the better game, but it is certainly the cleaner game. It plays so much faster, and its core mechanic is so much less convoluted, yet it introduces those same elements of unpredictability and uncertainty that you have in the Victory Games Civil War. That said, I also like the leader system in the Victory Games Civil War, right? So what I would have liked to have seen is a random leader system in U.S. Civil War as an option, and that way you could play it either way. For the People, Carl Crater mentions For the People. For the People is great. It's a fantastic game. I think I would rather play U.S. Civil War than For the People at this point, but I'm not giving up my copy of For the People either. So, because it really is not only a fantastic game, but extremely influential, right? It's the Mark Herman game in which the CDG mechanic reached its full maturity. Mark Hodgkinson, welcome to the stream. They're playing U.S. Civil War. And of course, that'll be reprinted. It's stunning to me that that's only its second printing. I know there was availability on the revised rulebook, but I'm surprised that hasn't been reprinted before, because every convention I go to has literally multiple tables of U.S. Civil War being run. So it's a very popular game, and it just plays really well. Stuka Joe does have a very good Victory Games Civil War video. Yes, that's true. And I have some Victory Games Civil War video back in the channel history. You'll see Grant get killed in his first week on the battlefield. So, Chad Kennedy mentions the Hexasim Waterloo. That's the Eagles of France Waterloo. That's a very nice series. It's got some... I'd like to play it at some point. It's got some... I like what they did with the command rules. And yet it does not seem like a pain in the ass to actually play, which sometimes some command rules end up being a pain in the ass. They have already, Hexasim has already reprinted that at least twice. So... Jason W. mentions that Compass is going to reprint the Victory Games Civil War. That's expected to be a more or less straight reprint, and it is also expected to be Eric Lee Smith's next project after he finishes Battle Helm Volume 2. This is not privileged information, but if you don't watch the Compass Games streams, you might not have picked up on it. I am going to be delighted to pick that up from Compass Games. One thing that is super common from Victory Games titles specifically is that the counters blow actual ass. The counters in there are terrible, like unreadably terrible in some cases. And I will be delighted to have a new edition with a better looking map and more readable counters and a rulebook that kind of brings it up to modern standards in terms of presentation, and yet also includes all of the refinements that have happened to that game over the decades. And you know, I just endorsed the GMT U.S. Civil War. I will also happily endorse the Victory Games Civil War. It's a very good game. And if you really want a hex and counter strategic level, but with a lot of operational flavor, game about the U.S. Civil War that really gives you a robust simulation of every aspect, including stuff happening out in the West that's not particularly important, and the naval stuff and all that other stuff, then that's going to be your go-to game. Some of those aspects are omitted or streamlined in GMT's U.S. Civil War, and I think that's done to good effect, right? It makes the game play in a fraction of the time. The Victory Game Civil War is probably a 20-hour game, maybe 15 to 25-hour game. You could play that U.S. Civil War in 5 or 6 hours. It vastly increases the efficiency of play. Hexasim counters and maps are I have never seen anything from Hexasim that I did not think was very attractive. And every Hexasim game that I have had has had pre-rounded corners. And that includes a couple of Eagles of France games, and somewhere behind me on the shelf, which you probably can't see, is a copy of Napoleon versus Europe, or Napoleon against Europe. That also has pre-rounded corners. And a 2-piece mounted map that's really nice. Yeah, Daniel Berger, I sympathize with that. I think where I land on that, though, is that there are times that I would prefer to have the randomized leader fatalities, and there are other times where I would prefer to have the leader entry and exit schedule. I kind of want both, and I'd kind of like to see an edition of that has both. And I haven't heard anything about the new edition having that. As the Victory Game Civil War folks discovered, however, if you are going to do that, say that, hey, you have the chance to lose leaders, there's not a schedule, it's randomized, then you need to create or have hypothetical leaders that last longer, right? If you have a 4-star General Lyon, for example, or a Stonewall Jackson that's still around in 1864, you need to kind of figure out or hypothesize a career trajectory for those individuals, and that can be a little bit challenging, but can also, more importantly, I think, feel a little artificial. John Longshore says that Jackson should have used Bragg as a human shield in 1863. Many Confederate leaders would have agreed with you, actually. Bragg was a bozo. For all, people complain with pretty good reasons about Union leadership in the Civil War, especially early on, until you saw like the emergence of leaders like Grant, Sherman, and Sheridan. The Union leadership situation was fairly dire for largely political reasons, but the Confederates were not immune to that, and Bragg is the example of the Confederates not being immune to that. Okay, so the way I organize ASL leaders is actually I put them in multiple compartments by leadership value or morale level or whatever that statistic is called, because that's how you're looking for them, right? You're looking for an 8-0 leader or a 9-1 leader or whatever, and it's just way easier to find them if they're sorted out into their own tray. So that's how I do it. Yeah, Stuka Joe mentions, so if you download the sort of updated and compiled rulebook for the Victory Game Civil War, in there will be the untried leaders variant also that Stuka Joe is talking about. And I didn't play with that, but I've heard good things about it. Rosecrance's problem was he had a really bad day, basically. And unfortunately, it was the day they fought the Battle of Chickamauga. And he was never the same after that. His confidence was blown after that. He was never the same after that. His performance in the Toloma campaign was spectacularly good. That was a brilliant campaign. Conducted almost, a near bloodless victory on his part of maneuver. And unfortunately, at Chickamauga, there were a lot of problems. The Union Army was all but completely routed. The bacon was only saved by the performance of George Thomas, the Rock of, I don't know why this is going off. The Rock of Chickamauga, and Rosecrans was ruined as a general after that. So, no, Bragg was, however, was aggressively incompetent. So, John Sy asked about other strategic level games like War for the Union, Price of Freedom, and MMP's Lincoln's War. So, I haven't played any of those, nor have I played, what's that one called? The Frank Chadwick game from GDW was later done by Mayfair. Somebody will mention it. I haven't played that either, and that's a point-to-point game. And I think that might be an early example of a point-to-point war game, actually. I can picture the box in my head, but the title I have in my head is Clash of Wills, which is a Shiloh game, not the whole game. Damn it, I can't think of it. It's right in my head, too. War for the Union is a Compass Games reprint of an older Clash of Arms game that had a pretty good reputation, but not as good a reputation as the Victory Game Civil War. I talked to some folks that were playing it and enjoying it at Compass Expo. They do like it. I think there's probably something good going on there. The map is relatively ugly in both editions of the game, in my opinion. A House Divided is the game I'm thinking of. Thank you, folks, for saving me from that embarrassing moment. Price of Freedom, I know virtually nothing about. MMP's Lincoln's War, I have not played. I have talked to some people who have played it, who have spoken of it in a non-favorable way. It is a point-to-point, I think, card-driven Civil War game. Probably plays faster than For the People. But again, I don't really need another strategic level Civil War point-to-point card-driven game because I have For the People, and it's a great game. I'll be delighted to play For the People again at some point. So it does sound better in Spanish. You're right. So yeah, and it's ironic that there's no good reason to name anything after Braxton Bragg in particular, because he was a bozo. But they left it up to like locals to name the bases, and that's why it got named after Braxton Bragg. So that is a topic we are not going to address in any detail here this evening. So Daniel Barker says that Price of Freedom is very abstract. I can believe that. I mean, House Divided is pretty abstract too. Everybody I've talked to that has played A House Divided says it's great. So, now, do I need A House Divided? No, I don't. I don't think I need a fast-playing point-to-point Civil War game. I think if I'm going to play something like that, you could play it For the People in a sitting. It's a long sitting. I'm much more inclined to do that than go for A House Divided. But that's just a taste thing on my part, right? That doesn't say anything about the game at all. So, hilariously, in our game, and you can go watch this, right? This is the game that we streamed. In our game of the Victory Game Civil War, I lost Grant in his first battle. Later on, Lee gets killed. I think Jackson gets killed at some point in that campaign. So I'm like, man, I hope Sherman doesn't get killed. And I had Sherman built up pretty good by the time we called the game. And I think I conceded as the Union player at that point. But I was doing reasonably well with Lyon and Sherman. I'm not going to argue with the idea that A House Divided is great. Like I said, everybody I've talked to that's played it totally agrees with that. So I am disinclined to argue the point. I had somebody ask about strategic level Revolutionary War games that are hex based, like with a hex map, that aren't 1776, and I was a bit stumped on that. It's like, strategic level, it covers the whole American Revolution. It's like, I'm not sure I could think there was the old S&T American Revolution, but that's not got that strong of a reputation. But I couldn't really think of other alternatives. So I think, are we done clipping? We might be done clipping. I've gotten an entire sheet done, so hey, it's progress. I could seriously be clipping ASL counters for the next 10 weeks, and we'd still, I still would only probably work through about a third of the pile. Jeff Beeler asks, what older war games are deserving of a reboot that have been overlooked? I think in many cases, those games are going to be games for which the rights are closely held. And specifically the games I'm talking about are basically everything from SPI and Europa. I think if somebody republished Fire in the East today, and people understood that it was, a new Fire in the East and didn't bloat the thing too badly, I think it would sell pretty well. Might not get played a lot, but I think it would sell pretty well. 447? No idea where these are. These are the other French infantry, right? So confused. Yeah, we'll figure it out later. It's fine. Like I said, there are 3 different OBs in there. Jeff Beeler, I think that's the S&T American Revolution game that I'm thinking of. It does not have a really great reputation. PanzerBlitz does not speak to me anymore either. But I do think that if somebody did like, hey, here's a new edition of PanzerBlitz, and it was like a straight up version of PanzerBlitz, I do think it might be popular. That's possible. And I wonder why MMP hasn't done that. None of their PanzerBlitz projects are even attempts to do that. So they did PanzerBlitz Hill of Death, which is really a different game system. And they did a magazine game called PanzerBlitz Carentan, which is, again, a different game system. And there's Sharon Boyd's new PanzerBlitz game, is East Front Battles or something like that. And that's still in development, but that uses a different system too, which I believe is different from both the Avalon Hill PanzerBlitz and the MMP PanzerBlitz, and I'm confused as to where that thing is positioned. And I think that's probably part of the marketing challenge with that at this point, is people don't really know what they're buying into, because they've kind of mixed up the branding so much. Ray Garby, first of all, thanks for stopping by. Decision is working on a game called North African Campaign, which I believe did start out as a new campaign for North Africa, but they backed away from that when the game is developing in a different direction. So you can keep an eye on that. I don't really have an opinion on it at this point, nor do I recall offhand who the designer is. Harry Rowland has talked in the past about doing a new edition of Empires in Arms. So I think as long as Harry's health holds out, I think we might actually see that. Stigler says PanzerBlitz has been republished as Panzer the series, the GMT Panzer. Now I think that's a bit different. That's quite a lot more detailed than PanzerBlitz actually. PanzerBlitz has like a 2-page rulebook. Air Force and Dauntless, some people like that. I think there's problems with those games. I'm not sure you see. Yeah, you do see it on the shelf behind me, actually. I think those are actually pretty good games, but they need some. I think they need some additional tuning if you were to republish them. I'm trying to not miss the question. Ray Garby asks about Frank Chadwick's Thunder in the East. So I think the vision for that is really good. I do think the components, the way they've done the components with a million different types and shapes and sizes of counters, is a little bit distracting. Nevertheless, I do think there's some interesting things going on in that system, and I'm very curious. However, that said, The Victory Point Games version, which is the only game that's out so far, the rest of the series passed to GMT when Victory Point Games went away, or not really went away, but got out of Wargaming. And they have kind of circled the wagons into, hey, we want to develop all of the games and then release them like chunk in rapid succession. Now that sounds good, but it has meant that there's been a huge delay in the release prospectus for the Med game, which is the next one in line. In the course of developing all those other games, they have made quite a few, some substantial changes to Thunder in the East. So at minimum, Thunder in the East needs an update kit, and they probably need a full reprint. The component quality of Thunder in the East is mixed. The maps are really nice. The counters look graphically, the counters are well designed, but the cardboard lamination on them is pretty bad. Every copy that I have seen has seen examples of the cardboard delaminating and falling apart. So I'm not a huge fan of that. Now, see, Flat Top is one that is in the works as coming back. I'll be honest, though, if somebody would want to do every single Pacific campaign as like the Flat Top, the series, I would buy that in a second. So there's some component quality problems. The rule book, they made the decision to do a perfect bound rule book in Thunder in the East. I have never seen a perfect bound rule book in a war game fail to fall apart pretty fast. And again, every single copy of the Thunder in the East rulebook that I personally have seen has been falling apart after a relatively modest amount of wear. So I think that was a mistake. So I'd really be more comfortable with GMT's component quality over whatever they did at Victory Point Games. Not happy. And the maps are nice and all the art's good. None of that is a problem. It's just the cardboard of the counters and the binding of the books was not great. Stigler mentions Beneath the Southern Cross. So I'm going to stop short of calling that a reboot of Flat Top, because my understanding of that game, and he was not there, Bill Cooper, I think, is behind that, and he was not there at Compass Expo, which is too bad because I wanted to talk to him. My understanding of that is that it lands in a place where it's quite different from Flat Top. It's the same idea. It's kind of built on the bones of Flat Top, but there's a lot of additional stuff in there when I looked at it, which was admittedly like 2 years ago. So it may have evolved in a more Flat Top type direction in the meantime. I'm nevertheless quite intrigued by the idea. And I would be happy to investigate that further. And it is one of my, Compass projects that are kind of on the back burner just because of timing that I'm very interested in. Is somebody saying that DAC was a reboot of Campaign for North Africa? Because if so, no. I mean, that's like saying DAC was a reboot of Desert Fox, right? I mean, they're on the same topic, but I'm not a fan of this idea that, hey, here's a new game on the Western Desert Campaign. It must just be a redo of Desert Fox. I mean, that's totally unhelpful. From a categorization standpoint of no value at all. Jason W. says he'd rather have AH's Africa Corps. Now, African Campaign, which according to many people is African Campaign done right, is coming out fresh from Compass pretty soon. So you can take a look at that. Perfidious Albion says that Air Force and Dauntless is slightly more complex than Fighting Wings. So I have Air Force and Dauntless, both of which are in that box. I haven't looked at Fighting Wings. They look fairly different to me. Fighting Wings, I think, is operational, or more operational anyway, where Air Force and Dauntless are very tactical air-to-air combat games. That's pretty different. So I'd be inclined to call that an apples and oranges type of comparison. Joe Perez says that he has an issue where the game turn takes longer to play than the amount of time that so this is like the classic problem of, I'm going to play out Waterloo, which was fought in, one day, and it's going to take us 10 weeks to play the game out, right? I appreciate that some people don't want to do that. I think that's a legitimate choice for you to make if you don't want to deal with that. But it is a choice that plenty of wargamers do choose to make. At least some small minority of wargamers do choose to make when they want to play a giant ass game of WoW or whatever it is, right? And that can be, I mean, it's almost always true. Even of like Napoleon's last battles, I mean, you could play Waterloo. That's probably less time than it took to fight the actual battle, by about half. But if you're playing the whole campaign, that's a little different, right? So, Alan Salazar, Frederick the Great. Boy, that's a good question. Where do those rights reside? Probably with Hasbro, and many publishers are not really inclined to monkey with Hasbro's legal department, even if Hasbro's legal department has no idea what they even own the rights to anymore. So, well, Dean may have said that, but I mean that does not make DAC a you know, a new take on CNA. It's the Western Desert campaign. I mean, just because it's on the same topic, wanting to do Campaign for North Africa right is a great design impetus, because most people would agree, at least at the time, that CNA was a huge misstep. I think that idea has been revisited now because we have tools like the internet and Excel and things like that that make it easier to handle games like that. Stigler says fighting is at least twice as complex as Air Force and Dauntless. But he also says it's tactical, so I could be wrong. Who knows? But I do agree that I wouldn't mind seeing a reboot of Frederick the Great. I even actually think that there is room to take that system to other conflicts of the period, besides the 7 Years' War. So, Ken X, welcome to the stream, mentions that if you measure Waterloo in man-hours, it takes way less time for two people to play. That's a good point. Agray Day mentions Philip Sabin. I've never played a Philip Sabin game. I've not really looked at his catalog lately, but the thing that I think I associate him with is that Lost Battles package. And there are some people that like that, but I'm not really interested. I'm not really feeling it. So, Daniel Berger mentions a nice map. Daniel, where is that map? Is that on BGG? Ken X mentions that there were some differences in the shading of the colors on one of the Twilight in the East maps, Thunder in the East maps, compared to the others. Okay, that I didn't have that in my copy. I can tell you that. Jeff Beeler, go check out Clay Stone's channel. He is doing some playthrough video of CNA, so feel free. So, okay, I guess Phil Sabin retired and disappeared into South America. Okay, I mean, that's fine. It's a free country after all. Stuka Joe mentioned Caesar at Elysia. I've heard a lot of people tell me that they really enjoyed that. Same with not Storm of Jerusalem, but Siege of Jerusalem as well. Not that they're particularly similar. I mean, they're both sieges, more or less. I would actually like to check out the Fighting Wings series. It looks like I would like it. I think Air Force and Dauntless might well suffer from the same people that try to play out Trafalgar and Wooden Ships and Iron Men with two people, right? Where you're just handling too much stuff. I think it's another one of those scenarios in which you have a limited number of vehicles at your command that you're having to control. And if you have too many, I think it will bog the game down. That's definitely true in Wooden Ships and Iron Men. Lauren Wiseman hopes to reboot his Roman Legions game. What game was that? Or unless we're talking about Caesar's Legions, if so, I didn't know that was a Lauren Wiseman game. So, I mean, so we have seen a few Avalon Hill titles come back, right? We've seen a new edition of Fortress Europa come from Compass. We've seen the new edition of War and Peace come from One Small Step. We've seen a more or less new edition with some changes of Guns of August in Empires and Alliances from Compass, which I keep hearing good things about actually. It's on the limited stock list, so if you want to buy it, go get it now. I chose not to buy it at Compass Expo, but frankly, I had already spent enough money, and then I had spent some more money at Compass Expo, so I was satisfied with my decision to not. And I also did pick up Balance of Powers again, so I kind of covered on World War I at that scale. And that also replaces my desire to also pick up Storm of Steel again, which is a game that I think had a lot of potential, but doesn't have any more potential than Balance of Powers, and Balance of Powers is more polished. So, now the version of Frederick and I haven't played Frederick the Great yet. The version that I have is the original SPI version. So, like the original SPI version in the flat. So, although I think the original was in S&T, I think. So, I mean, diplomacy's never gone away, right? There were people playing diplomacy. There were at least 2 tables that I saw people playing diplomacy at Origins this year. Just like out in open gaming, not even like, well, it might not, maybe it was a scheduled event, I don't know, but there were 2 full tables of people playing diplomacy. I think it's Legendary Tactics has done a ton of diplomacy content on YouTube too, and if I was super into diplomacy, I'd be all over that channel. As it is, I have watched a bunch of the videos because they're actually cool to watch, and their production values are quite high. So the new Russian campaign. I have speculated in the past about the reasons for the delays of the Russian campaign reprint from GMT. I'm not going to speculate again because I was told I was wrong, and hey, I could have been wrong. So I am going to say it's still not out yet. Hit its number years and years and years ago, and I don't know what the problem is. There is supposed to be a new version of Russian campaign coming out from Compass anytime, but I think that got delayed to January. So, a lot of people love diplomacy, and one of the first things that when Hasbro took over Avalon Hill to do a Hasbro edition of, were like Acquire and Diplomacy. So, and they're both still in print. I'm not quite as sure about Acquire, but Diplomacy's still in print. So, yeah, I'd much rather play Diplomacy with people I don't know. Perfectly happy with that. So we hit, what was our peak at? Looks like that's a lot, man. 127 tonight, despite me not giving anything away. I do have a couple of names from last week, so you folks stay tuned. That were runner-ups from last week. We're gonna end up doing something good for you at some point. Maybe for the Christmas stream that will be on the channel on December 27th. It'll be slightly post-Christmas, but I'd rather do it post-Christmas than pre-Christmas, just because of the way my schedule works out. I've got, like, vacation time I gotta burn, so I'm gonna end up taking most of that week off, which I've never done before. And frankly, I'm just gonna like sleep till noon every day. That's my actual plan. It's just, I ain't getting up at 8 noon yet. Screw this. So, yeah, my first S&T was like number 78 or 79. It was one with Paratroop, something like that. The number is I think it was number 79 is what I remember. I have a bunch of those now, and some of those games I think are worth revisiting. In particular, some of the oddball ones, like Tito and the Plot to Assassinate Hitler. Stuka Joe has done some video on the Plot to Assassinate Hitler with some tricked out components too, and it really looks kind of neat. I do have it. I think mine's missing some counters, so I'd have to go through it. But and I actually started doing a new map for it just because I'm a nut. Which didn't go anywhere, and I'm not sure where that file even is nowadays. Ken X, thanks for stopping by. Yep, Machiavelli that's my understanding, is that Machiavelli is just diplomacy. Brian Jarvis, thanks for stopping by. Marty Sample is also here. Marty, thanks. says the last time he ever saw a raging shouting max and table flip was a diplomacy game. Well, that's the reputation of diplomacy, I can tell you that. Stonewall was quite early. Stonewall, I would encourage people to like look at just go look at the pictures of Stonewall on BGG and look how friggin' small that game is, right? It's Battle of Kernstown, right? It was kind of the progenitor of the sort of the proto Great Battles of the American Civil War system. John Sy, that's pretty cool. Scrimmage, and it's unpunched, amazingly. I think every copy of Scrimmage remains unpunched to this day. Well, Doc doesn't exactly have... I wonder about his instincts. I don't know. You know, it's the kind of game that because of the map, I think people would balk at the map nowadays. I don't have anything to say about Doc's instincts as a guy running a company or a publisher or a marketing guy or anything. I think they've made a lot of really kind of we're just going with the flow type of decisions and allowed some of the creative types to run amok sometimes. This is going to sound weird and possibly disjointed. But I don't have confidence in leadership at Decision, even though I like some of the Decision product, right? I don't have confidence in the guidance of that company. Joe Perez was the designer of Eben Emmel. That's the one I remember the best. That was my first war game as a kid, was Paratroop, right? I remember this very clearly, and you know, reacquiring a copy was like, ooh, I remember this, blah, 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 blah. So that's actually a neat little package of 3 different airborne battles: Crete, Eben Emmel, and Red Devils in Arnhem, actually. So I think the S&T Stonewall nowadays is mainly interesting as a historical artifact, for insight into the sort of genesis of great battles of the American Civil War, rather than as necessarily a great game that you got to go play. I think Stigler's right. I think you'd end up having a better experience playing Kernstown out of Death Valley, and I frankly think you'll have a better experience playing Kernstown in the Blind Swords Kernstown. Because the early, remember, it's like proto GBACW, right? I think it predates, I might be wrong about this, but I remember the chronology as it predates Terrible Swift Sword. Stigler will correct me if that's wrong, and it might be, but first game after Terrible Swift Sword. Okay, well, you know, it's really small. It's a really compact game. So, and the idiosyncrasies of that game system, of that early GBACW game system, have been covered elsewhere. I would suggest going and looking at Gilbert Collins' videos on Terrible Swift Sword specifically, and he can go through that with, I think, more insight than I can. I have never played Terrible Swift Sword, but I have played 3 Days of Gettysburg, which is good, right? I think it needs a revision, frankly. There's some sloppy stuff in it, like the names of the sizes of rivers on the terrain key on the map doesn't match the one on the TEC. There's just some sloppy stuff, and this is like the 3rd edition too. There's some sloppy stuff in it that I'd prefer to see cleaned up. Wooden Ships and Iron Men is a great game. It's a classic game. Many people feel it's still the best Age of Sail game. I have played, since the last time I played Wooden Ships and Iron Men, I have also played Flying Colors and Close Action. And I like Close Action a lot. But Close Action feels a lot like Starfleet battles in the Age of Sail, right? And if you don't like that, then that's going to be a problem. And then Flying Colors, of course, is more of a fleets game than it is a ship-on-ship game, where Wood Ships and Iron Men is more of a ship-on-ship game. You're going to be running like 1 or 2, maybe 3 ships. And that's kind of where it really becomes difficult to manage if you get bigger than that. So it's really hard to play out a huge battle like Trafalgar unless you have a giant you're at a convention, you got teams or something like that. Republic of Rome, great game, and that was redone by Valley Games. It's a brilliant game, but like many brilliant Avalon Hill games or Avalon Hill acquisitions of the era, it takes way too long to play. That's true of Civ, that's true of Titan, that's true of Republic of Rome, that's true of History of the World. They should play in somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 the amount of time that it takes to actually play them. That said, other than the play time, those are all really good games. So okay, so the morale comes in with Stonewall, and there's like a troop quality rating in current GBACW that covers that. I mean, they had a whole. If you go watch my flip through of the old Avalon Hill catalog from like 1983, there's a huge line of sports games, a couple of which I actually played back in the day and liked. I would never consider playing a sports board game nowadays. Not something I'm into. But I played Status Pro Football and Status Pro Baseball back in the day and enjoyed them both very much. And I think you could still get new cards for them somewhere. You might have to print them yourself, but I think you can still get them. Mike Orwick says, Cold War game question. He has World War III on pre-order from Compass. What game are we talking about? Because if we're talking about Third World War, the Frank Chadwick Third World War, that's a new edition of the old GDW Classic. That's a great game system, right? It's 4 games. And it's going to be a great package. I think it's a mistake to compare it directly to the Bruce Maxwell NATO, which is great, actually. I liked it way more than I thought I was going to, a year when I first heard they're working on this. For a couple of reasons. One, it's really well done. It really takes that game and that classic game and kind of doesn't completely change it, but it really fixes the things that were wrong. If you want to hear about those things, you can watch my interview with Bruce, and Mo has got some video on that too. Mo's got more video on that game than I do. It's really good. It's really solid. It's really tight. It plays really well. It's at a quite different scale than the Third World War series is, however. So that's kind of this whole sort of Central Germany front, Warsaw Pact drive on the Rhine, where the Third World War covers the initial conflagration of the Third World War in the Middle East, and then it spreads to Central Europe and the Balkans and the Arctic and stuff like that. So it's a pretty different series. I am going to be, while I think that I have more Cold War Gone Hot games than I need, I am going to be very comfortable owning both of those. I have NATO, the Bruce Maxwell NATO, and I have Third World War on order, and can't wait to get it. And it's at the printer. So, Status Pro Basketball, that's another one. I never played any of the basketball games. I don't like basketball enough to play a basketball board game. I was into football at one point. So, Founding Fathers is a game that I have heard good things about. And I have also heard, I think, that they kind of started with a Republic of Rome type idea. James Whitmer says he still plays sports action football on the Canadian Football League. Hey man, if you're having fun with that, I'm not dogging on it. It's just not something I'd be into now. I mean, we're slightly over time, but I still have a little bit of whiskey left here. I mean, as a sports person, I'm from Cleveland, okay? It's really pretty difficult to be a sports fan in Cleveland, okay? And I know the Indians went to a couple of World Series, and the Cavs won a championship, and then LeBron fled as fast as he could. But especially if you're a football fan in Cleveland, and for decades and decades, the football was where it's at in Cleveland. The Browns leaving Cleveland completely took any gas I had in the tank out of my desire to be involved in sports fandom in any capacity. And that was a long time ago. Now I, am sufficiently interested to occasionally check the scores. I am not sufficiently interested to watch games or anything like that. I am more inclined to watch a World Cup game or something like that. But I can't get into it. The art betrayed by Art Modell. I can't do it. So so bear that in mind if in what I'm saying about sports games, right? Ooh, David Imperato says he lost his 3-Dog to Hurricane Ida. So Alan's got to get to work on that new reprint of 3-Dog is what's got to happen. So we can all have it again. And I'll be honest, if they did a new edition of it, I would buy it. I don't know about this year, John. The Browns not that good. They actually had a pretty good year last year, and they're not a total embarrassment this year. And Baker Mayfield is totally overrated. That is absolutely true. Minor league baseball is actually cool. I mean, you can go to a game for $10, right? And a big part of the Rams leaving Cleveland was before my time. The 3-Dog is 3 Days of Gettysburg. That is the GBACW Gettysburg title by Richard Berg and GMT. And there's been 3 editions of it, which differ significantly. Another thing that keeps me out of sports is you can't. I mean, I don't want to spend $100 for a friggin' ticket to like anything, right? I mean, occasionally I'll get like comp tickets. When I lived in Cleveland, I would occasionally get like comp tickets to Indians games or something like that, and once to a Cavs game. But other than that, I wasn't paying $80 for a seat. Screw that. I go buy a Wargame for that amount of money. So I totally understand if the Chargers leaving San Diego busted people on the NFL. Completely sympathize. And then I'm like surprised when, what do you mean Las Vegas as a team now? Because I just don't keep up with that. I've kept up more closely with Ohio State football for obvious reasons, because you can't escape it here in town. But I still generally don't watch the games. Dr. Witz Board Games, thanks for stopping by. There is absolutely zero probability that I will be at PAX Unplugged. If I were retired and had unlimited disposable income, I would consider it. I am not retired, nor is my income unlimited, so no. And it's not that that's a bad event. That's that I just don't have the space for that. I am not, even the way the situation looks like it's going to develop in 2022 for me for vacation time, I still don't have enough vacation time to do all the stuff I want to do. So I got to make decisions, which means Winterfest, Origins, and something with the wife, and then whatever's left, then I will do other stuff with. So Buckeye Game Fest is high on that list as well. I'd like to go to Consum World, but that seems unlikely this year just because of the vacation time. But I could think of, we could think about that if I can get the time off unpaid or something like, which I think it might be possible. If that's the case, then I could consider it, but it is an expensive trip too. So there is a line. So there's 3 line of battle games so far, and you can use the line of battle rules. I've been talking at a relatively high intensity for too long, but we're about to be done. So let me mention that I have a Wargaming storage video coming tomorrow. It is on OCS. I have the stream with Dan on Wednesday, which is here. And unless I shit the bed and don't get it done, there will be an unboxing video on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Assuming I can get all those done. So, Maryland campaign by Greg Laubach is an insta-buy for me, Stigler. So get that done too. I'm holding you accountable for any delays on any of these GBACW products, since you're our man in Amsterdam on GBACW specifically. I do like Line of Battle too, however. I mean, I will tell you that. There's 3 Line of Battle games out. None But Heroes, which is out and very hard to get. And there's Last Chance for Victory, which is Gettysburg, which I have and which also goes for a lot of money. It's out of print now. And To Take Washington, which is still available, which is Monocacy and Fort Stevens, which is relatively small. It's a pretty good introduction to Line of Battle. So if you're interested in that in that system, I recommend looking at To Take Washington. I don't have any information about PAX Unplugged because it's not something that I've considered going to. There are there is a fair amount of analog gaming happening at PAX Unplugged, though. So, I mean, it's not just video games, which the original PAX was kind of focused on, but even at the original PAX, there's still a fair amount of analog content. So, all right. So, and the next line of battle game is called I think it's called No Turning Back on the Wilderness. That's going to be a good game too. I predict anyway. I've talked to the developer Chip Farr about it. It's been a while now, but that should go. We're going to talk Perfidious Albion. We're going to talk about that specific topic tomorrow. We're going to talk about how I store my OCS markers. So I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. If you'd like to support the channel, start by hitting thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to do more, please check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi, blah, 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 blah. I would like to thank everybody. We will, of course, be back next week with a topic to be determined later. I would like to thank everybody for stopping by tonight. We have had a remarkably successful night, and I really appreciate everybody who stopped by and participated.